a smashburger with you being asked these questions. And suddenly the conversation goes from a few thousand jars and lids to we need to do a purchase order of 1 million.
If you could choose one thing for people to know the truth about you, what would that one thing be?
The one thing, oh gosh, what's the one thing?
What happens when one of the world's biggest media companies calls out Meghan Markle for staying silent when she should be speaking up? Bloomberg just dropped a bombshell interview that has everyone talking, and the aftermath is absolutely wild. So let's start from the beginning. On August 26, 2025, Meghan Markle appeared on Bloomberg's The Circuit with Emily Chang. The interview was supposed to promote her Netflix show with Love Meghan and her new lifestyle brand, As Ever. Everything seemed normal at first. They talked about her entrepreneurial journey, her pricing strategies, and even some childhood stories about activism. But then Emily Chang did something that changed the entire tone of the interview. She brought up Meghan's past political statements, specifically her 2016 comments calling Donald Trump divisive and misogynistic. Chang asked the question that has everyone talking.
I saw you do an interview in 2016, and you had some choice words for President Trump.
I think it was in 2012, like the Republican Party lost the female vote by 12 points. That's a huge number. And with as misogynistic as Trump is and so vocal about it.
Are there things you want to say now but feel you can't? Meghan's response was telling. She said, "No, I just make a choice of what matters to me and what's important to me." That was a different time in 2016.
Things you're dying to say or do right now that you feel like you can't.
No, I just make a choice of what matters to me and what's important to me. And that was a different time in 2016, certainly. But no, I mean, what was that, the Larry Wilmore show?
If there's anything I wanted to say or felt necessary to say, then I would say it. But that's not where I'm at right now. But here's where it gets interesting. Chang didn't let it go. She pressed further, asking about the direction the country is going. And Meghan's answer has sparked a massive debate. Instead of taking a clear stance on current political issues, Meghan gave what many are calling a safe response. Now, on the surface, this sounds perfectly reasonable, right? Who doesn't want humanity and connection? But here's where Bloomberg and media critics are pushing back hard. The argument being made is that this kind of neutral, kumbaya response is actually harmful in today's political climate. When there are serious issues like democracy under threat, immigrant rights being attacked, and various other pressing concerns, some argue that neutrality is not just inadequate, it's a form of privilege. One particularly scathing analysis pointed out that Meghan's silence on current issues stands in stark contrast to her 2016 outspokenness. Back then, she was willing to call Trump divisive and misogynistic, and even said she'd consider staying in Canada if he became president.
The Republican Party lost the female vote by 12 points. That's a huge number. And with as misogynistic as Trump is and so vocal about it.
Fast forward to 2025, and she's talking about shared humanity instead of addressing specific threats to democracy. But this isn't just about one interview. They're pointing to a broader pattern in Meghan's public statements over the years. Let's look at the timeline. In 2016, she was vocal about Trump. In 2020, she and Harry urged Americans to vote against hate speech, widely seen as another rebuke of Trump. But by 2022, their political messaging had become much more watered down. Their midterm election message was basically, voting matters no matter who you vote for. Pretty bland stuff. And now, in 2025, when asked directly about current political issues, she's deflecting entirely. There's also the controversial situation with the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. Earlier this year, the Archewell Foundation cut ties with this grassroots organization after media criticism about the founder's statements on Palestine. Critics argue this shows the Sussexes are willing to make political decisions, just not brave ones. They'll act when media pressure pushes them, but they won't take risks to defend vulnerable communities. The pattern that's emerging is this. Meghan was willing to speak out when the stakes were relatively low or when popular opinion was on her side. But when speaking out might actually cost something, when it might anger powerful people or affect business interests, suddenly she's all about shared humanity and staying above the fray. So where does Bloomberg fit into all this? Well, it's not just that Emily Chang asked tough questions, it's what happened after the interview that's really got people talking. The interviewer didn't just accept Meghan's non-answers. Bloomberg's coverage and subsequent analysis essentially called out what they saw as Meghan's retreat from meaningful political engagement. They highlighted the contrast between her past activism and her current silence. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Bloomberg's challenge goes beyond just this one interview. They're essentially asking, if you're going to position yourself as a former activist and someone who cares about social justice, how can you stay silent when those very issues are under attack? The media outlet is arguing that Meghan's privilege allows her to disengage from politics in a way that millions of Americans, immigrants, women, LGBTQ+ individuals, people of color, simply cannot. For them, staying above the fray isn't an option because the policies being debated directly affect their lives. Bloomberg's position seems to be, you can't have it both ways. You can't build your brand partly on your activist past and then refuse to engage when activism is most needed. Now, Meghan does have her defenders, and their arguments are worth considering. Some argue that she's being strategic, with Harry's immigration status potentially vulnerable due to his admissions of past drug use in his memoir, Spare. Speaking out politically could put their family at risk. The Heritage Foundation, a right-wing think tank, has already challenged Harry's visa status, and Trump himself has made comments about going after Harry. Others say Meghan has every right to focus on her business ventures and family life, rather than being forced into political commentary. She's not an elected official, they argue, and shouldn't be expected to be a political spokesperson. There's also the argument that constant political commentary might hurt her business interests. If she wants her lifestyle brand to succeed, alienating half the country with political statements might not be the smartest business move. But the critics aren't buying these excuses. They point out that Trump has since backed down from his threats against Harry.
Harry is whipped. Do you know the expression whipped?
I'm familiar with it.
I won't use the full expression. But Harry is whipped like no person I think I've ever seen. I'm not a fan of...
They argue that if Meghan's voice on democracy depends on Harry's paperwork, then she's essentially letting her opponents win by self-censoring. The business argument also falls flat for critics who point out that many successful celebrities and business owners take political stances without destroying their careers. In fact, some argue that authenticity, even controversial authenticity, can be better for business than bland neutrality. This controversy touches on something much bigger than just Meghan Markle. It's about celebrity activism, privilege, and what we expect from public figures in times of crisis. The Bloomberg challenge raises uncomfortable questions. What's the point of celebrity activism if celebrities retreat when things get tough? How much should we rely on wealthy, privileged individuals to speak for social justice causes? And what happens when those individuals prioritize their comfort over the causes they once championed? There's also the question of authenticity. Meghan has built much of her public persona around her activist background. The famous story about writing to Procter & Gamble as a child, her work on gender equality, and her support for various causes. But if that activism was only convenient when it didn't cost her anything, was it ever really authentic? The Bloomberg interview has also highlighted how privilege works in practice. It's one thing to speak out when you're a relatively unknown actress with little to lose. It's another when you're a global celebrity with business interests, family considerations, and massive wealth that could be affected by political stances. There's another layer to this story that's worth exploring: the Netflix angle. Royal experts have pointed out that Meghan's most personal and revealing comments came in the Bloomberg interview, not on her Netflix show that premiered the same day. This has led to speculation that Netflix executives might be frustrated. They're paying the Sussexes millions for content, but the really interesting insights about Meghan's life and perspectives are being shared elsewhere. Some industry insiders suggest this shows a disconnect between Meghan's business strategy and her media appearances. If she's saving her most authentic self for prestigious outlets like Bloomberg while giving Netflix safer, more sanitized content, that could create tension. The timing is particularly awkward because Netflix is investing heavily in the Sussexes brand. If Meghan is more willing to be authentic and take risks in other forums, it raises questions about the value Netflix is getting for their investment. The internet's reaction to this whole situation has been absolutely wild. Social media has basically split into camps, and the debate is getting heated. On one side, you have people applauding Bloomberg for holding Meghan accountable. They're sharing clips of the interview and pointing out the contrast between her past statements and current silence. Hashtags like #MeghanHypocrisy and #PrivilegedSilence have been trending. The criticism is particularly harsh from people who once supported Meghan. Former fans are expressing disappointment that someone they saw as a champion for social justice has seemingly retreated when her voice is most needed. But Meghan's supporters are fighting back hard. They're arguing that she's being unfairly targeted and that women, especially women of color, face impossible standards. They point out that male celebrities don't face the same pressure to be political spokespeople. There's also been discussion about the editing of the interview itself. Some fans have pointed out what they see as odd editing choices, suggesting that Bloomberg may have manipulated the conversation to make Meghan look worse. The debate has gotten so intense that it's spawning countless YouTube videos, Twitter threads, and think pieces. Everyone seems to have an opinion on whether Bloomberg went too far or whether their challenge was justified. So, where does this leave Meghan Markle? The Bloomberg controversy seems to represent a turning point in how she's being covered and perceived. For years, much of the criticism of Meghan focused on her relationship with the royal family, her family drama, or tabloid gossip. This feels different. This is substantive criticism about her values, her authenticity, and her willingness to stand up for what she claims to believe in. Bloomberg's challenge has essentially forced a conversation about what kind of public figure Meghan wants to be. Does she want to be seen as an activist and social justice advocate? If so, critics argue she needs to act like one even when it's inconvenient. Or does she want to focus primarily on being a businesswoman and lifestyle guru? That's perfectly valid, but it might require acknowledging that her activist days are behind her. The problem for Meghan is that she seems to want it both ways. To be seen as someone who cares about social justice while avoiding the risks that come with actually advocating for those causes in difficult times. So, did Bloomberg go too far in challenging Meghan Markle? Let's break this down. On one hand, Bloomberg did what good journalism is supposed to do. They asked tough questions and didn't accept non-answers. They pointed out inconsistencies between Meghan's past statements and current silence. They highlighted how privilege allows some people to disengage from politics, while others don't have that luxury. The interview revealed something important about Meghan that her more controlled Netflix appearances don't show. It demonstrated how she responds when pressed on difficult topics, and that response was telling. Bloomberg also didn't resort to personal attacks or tabloid-style gossip. They focused on substantive issues about activism, privilege, and political engagement. That's exactly the kind of coverage public figures should expect. On the other hand, some might argue that Bloomberg set up an impossible standard. No one should be forced to be a political spokesperson just because they're famous. And the expectation that Meghan should risk her family's security or business interests for political causes could be seen as unfair. But here's the thing. Bloomberg isn't forcing Meghan to be political. They're pointing out the gap between how she's positioned herself and how she's actually behaving. If you build your brand partly on activism and social justice, you should expect to be held accountable when you abandon those positions. The real issue isn't that Meghan chose to focus on business over politics. The issue is that she seems to want the credibility that comes with being seen as an activist without accepting the responsibilities that come with that role. But what do you think? Should Meghan be speaking out more, or is she right to focus on her own life and business? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of our new uploads.